kind of up and coming are the leaders of the future and that sort of thing. Because I'll be honest with you, when I first got involved in this in like 2009, there just aren't very many young conservatives, because a lot of times when you're younger, you are liberal. I mean, when I was in college, I was liberal. That's just the way I was. Not a classical liberal, but, the kinds of liberal. I'm basically trying to pay a penance, I guess, for all my ridiculous thoughts in the past. But anyway, welcome back. Welcome to the program for the first time. We have Mr. Kyle Boyd with us. He's our guest today for our Young Conservative or Conservative Future segment. Kyle, welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Paul. It's good to be with you this morning.
Absolutely. I'm glad to have you. So talk to us, Kyle. Let's just start from the top. You're 29 years old, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, so you're 29. How did you develop a conservative worldview, and how did you arrive at this point?
Well, honestly, I've been conservative probably my whole life. I think, like you said just a moment ago, when I was in college, there were probably some times where I had a little more liberal-leaning ideologies at times. But I grew up in a conservative home. I grew up in you grow up in the South. Most of us tend to grow up, I think, in the South, or traditionally have grown up in the South in more of a conservative environment. Grew up with a family that's, very Christian faith oriented. And so for me, it wasn't really a battle to become a conservative. It's always just kind of been what my family has believed and stood for, whether that be conservative socially and morally, or even politically and fiscally conservative. So it's just kind of always been ingrained in my DNA from the very beginning.
Well, that's good, and we hear that from a lot of folks, how it was their upbringing that led them to this point. And I always, when I hear that, sometimes I forget to say this, but I think if we have any young parents out there listening, that is something to certainly take to heart, and to not just hear, but to implement and realize how valuable a strong family and parenting and being intentional with your kids is, not necessarily so that they come up and agree with all of your views politically, but just, what kind of influence you do have as parents over your kids. And it's very, very important. Now, Kyle, what is it that you do right now for a living? I talked to you earlier. You're actually involved in you have two things that you do, right?
Yeah, I'm bivocational. I in my secular career, I work as a CFO of ABC Block and Brick in Little Rock. We manufacture concrete masonry units, and then in the other part of my world, I am on the pastoral staff at Turnpoint Church in Conway.
Wow, that's awesome. And so, how did you fall into the pastoral staff there? Was that what you were doing initially, or were you in the secular world initially?
Well, I've grown up in ministry. My family's been in the ministry, and I always knew I had a call of God on my life to pursue and to follow. Doesn't mean I always followed it as well as I should. There are times, when you're younger, when you're in college, you don't want to follow God always. Mm-hmm. But I got my secular degree and went to work. I started my career at a public accounting firm in Northwest Arkansas, and then became a youth pastor there at a church in Rogers, and then moved back down. I went to school at UCA, and so we moved back down. My wife and I did move back down here a couple of years ago. Started working in the church here, worked in some various positions, and now we oversee the youth and the college and young adult groups, as well as some other administrative things at the church. But it's been, like I said, I grew up in a ministry family, and just like my conservative values were always there from the very beginning, ministry roots and trying to follow after the will of God has always been, always been there in our minds of trying to follow what He wants us to do. So it's just, I don't know that I can say it was a moment in time where it was like, you got to do this, but God has just continued to open doors for us. We've tried to follow the best we could.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. Welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. This is the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine, and we got to have your help to do it. Thanks so much for being with us. Telephone number 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. You can also go to facebook.com/Conduit News, and you can watch us do the program live. We do have a new whiteboard for you for the rest of the short week that we have. Principle, not personality. That is really what it's all about. Principle, not personality. And we're going to continue pointing out the status quo right now, what's going on in the state of Arkansas, what's going on at the Marble Palace. Principle, not personality. And matter of fact, I will tell you this, I guess I'm going to save this to the top of the next hour. I want to talk a little bit about the backlash when you don't stand on principle. Okay, when you don't stand on principle and you are exposed as being, I guess, just a massive hypocrite, then there's a backlash sometimes where the pendulum will swing back the other way. And that's why it's I've worried about that for a long time with the Arkansas Republican Party, very much so. Mainly because my whole philosophy, or my hypothesis rather, is that if you continue growing government under the flag of the Republican Party that is in direct contrast to the platform of that party, when you get negative results, or you have scandals, or you have whatever the case may be, the press, who is liberal, that is a progressive media force, they will say it's conservatism's fault. It's the limited government people's fault, when the reality is none of our ideas, in many cases, we don't even have a seat at the table when it comes to actually trying to shrink the size of government or just keeping it the same size. So that has been my fear for a long time here, and I actually said that to the Faulkner County Tea Party when I spoke to them last Thursday. A great group of folks. I was really glad to be there. The flip side of this, I guess I would say a microcosm, but I think it's even bigger. If you look at what Ireland has done with their vote to legalize abortion over the weekend, and I'm going to save that until 7, but there's a part in that article where it talks about that this was a huge blow to the church, and I want to discuss that further with you at 7 o'clock, 7:05. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, we'll be talking with Mr. Tim Loggins from the Patriots of Act 746. He's the director, or the head organizer of the Northeast Arkansas chapter. I understand they have a meeting this weekend. Always good to talk to him. But we're going to talk about case law. We're going to talk about what's going on. I think it's at a Greenbrier with an arrest that happened. And really good to talk about law enforcement and what we can do. How do we get, when it comes to Act 746, where it comes to the concept of permitless carry, how do law enforcement and the people get on the same page? How does that happen? What needs to happen? What can we do to reach out? What is it just getting the message out? Is it just continuing to do segments like this? We're going to talk to Tim about that. coming up at the bottom of the hour. But I want to do a little bit of a flashback before we get to that. I want to do this flashback article. I saw this was reposted. This is a January 13th article. January 13th from 2016 over at Conduit for Action. And it was reposted over on their Facebook page. And I think I understand why. This was, again, back in January of 2016. And the headline is Private Option / Arkansas Works equals a tax increase. Now, keep in mind, this was back in January of 2016. This is before we saw the 2017 session, and we saw all of the, what? Tax increases. The ones that were defeated, proposed by Republicans and Republican establishment, defeated by true conservatives, or the ones that were proposed by Republicans and establishment and passed. Okay? And here we have an article from 2 years ago saying that Arkansas Works equals a tax increase. This is something. You want to know why they're talking about a property tax statewide? You want to know why they're talking about a grocery tax increase and then a welfare program for lower income people, who have to pay the higher grocery tax because they, I was thinking today on the grocery tax. And listen, I know Asa says that they're not going to. He's not going to support it anymore, and I don't think he will. But I think that's really torpedoed the task force. They've got a ton of meetings between now and August. I mean, they are very busy, and I think they're trying to figure out what to do because I don't think we really have the money that they thought we were going to have. And of course, I think again, Arkansas Works equals a tax increase, and this has been talked about by. But if you want to know why, you have to look at what the key driver of our spending is. So. This is, again, 2 years ago. Conduit for Action wrote, if you are unfamiliar with terms Medicaid expansion or private option or Arkansas Works or who is covered, there's an explanation at the bottom of this article. Okay, I think we all know what this is. If Arkansas continues Medicaid expansion, Arkansas taxes will increase. Boy, that sums it up to the point, and also is exactly what's happened. If Arkansas continues Medicaid expansion, Arkansas taxes will increase. I had a conversation the other day with a friend who said, about the revenue-neutral tax cuts, even if we've established that if it's revenue-neutral, it's not a tax cut because the burden is still the same, on the people. But they were saying, but really, revenue-neutral is almost a tax increase if you're just doing a shell game because somebody somewhere is paying something else. They called the military tax cut, the military retirement tax cut, revenue neutral, but even that was a tax increase. If you just look at the fact that military veterans who would get the tax cut, okay, the retirees, they'd get the tax cut, but if they go now and buy candy and soda, they're not now paying the full sales tax on candy and soda. So somebody, you see what I'm saying? Even for them, they're the very veterans that that were used as political pawns. They still have to pay if they buy a book online. They're now paying a digital download tax. So even if they say it's a revenue neutral tax cut, I'm going to say number one, it's not a tax cut. But you can make the case that it's a tax increase because you got somebody somewhere. If you're going to lower taxes here on somebody and raise them over here, somebody somewhere is paying more tax than they were, right? Now, see, they can't stand that we're even talking about these definitions. But again, if you want to heal, or if you want to know, I don't even know if healing is on the horizon. But if you want to know why we have these divisions, again, we can't agree on what the definitions of words and phrases are. Arkansas' share of the cost, again, an article from 2 years ago, is estimated to be $656 million for 2017, through 2021, so during that span. That is an average of $131 million per year, and is a very low estimate because the period only includes 1 year during which Arkansas' share of the cost is a 10% match. Even at $131 million a year, that is a lot of taxpayer money, Arkansas money. For comparison, it's twice the annual appropriation to the Arkansas State Police. Supporters of Medicaid expansion will try to convince you that it's all free money. They make the following conflicting claims: that Medicaid expansion pays for itself and even makes money for the state. That claim doesn't add up. It's primarily based on the liberal idea that the more taxpayer money you spend, the more you stimulate the economy and bring in more taxpayer money to spend. It doesn't make any sense. It's a Keynesian philosophy. It's a Barack Obama concept. Number two, savings from cuts and reforms to traditional Medicaid will pay for Medicaid expansion. This argument conflicts with their first argument. In addition, the shift of money from traditional Medicaid will hasten the need to raise taxes to support traditional Medicaid. You see what they're doing here? Number three, there's a pile of federal tax money that other states will get if we don't claim our share. This argument has been shown to be false constantly. You have no concept of the budgeting process. Just go to they cite the Congressional Research Office. But anyway, again, what's the headline here? Private option, Arkansas works, equals a tax increase, an article written 2 years ago. And what are they talking about? What did they do? They increased your taxes on tires. They created a new tax on tires. They tried to increase your tax on the internet. They tried to increase your tax on the gas tax. They succeeded at increasing your taxes on candy and soda. They succeeded at increasing your taxes or creating a brand new tax on digital downloads like ringtones or books, online books and things like that. And you know, they get really mad when you point that out, but that's the truth. You know, they say, "What about an income tax reduction?" Yes, you did do that. You definitely cut the taxes when it comes to income, but you're searching for funds in all other places. And here's the thing: you're so desperate for the money, it's obvious, because in order to try to get the internet tax passed, which you failed, you guys. Which you failed at doing thanks to conservatives, you guys were calling the opponents of your attempt to raise our taxes. You were calling us tax cheats because you're saying that you already owe this tax. It's like, okay, well, go ahead and collect the use tax. But what you guys are doing is a new sales tax on out-of-state sellers. That's what you wanted to do. But feel free to collect that use tax. Feel free to get the Department of Finance, feel free for them to come up with some scheme to try to collect on these use taxes that they're missing out on. I don't think that's going to be very politically popular, but hey, you guys are the ones responsible for enforcing existing laws, so enforce it. Medicaid. It's not our fault that technology is awesome and is providing people a convenience. I mean, it's not our fault. This is just what the market has done. And honestly, if the government was involved in the first place, then the internet wouldn't be near where it is now. Okay, again, tax increases. Why are they now trying to think about ending the tax exemptions on churches and groceries, things like that? Again, it's because of the key driver of our spending. Okay, they have to find a way as Republicans to say they cut your taxes and brag about it, but really, they want more of your money. They need more. It's a necessity, but they also know they know how they all campaign. They know what that platform says. Arkansas's consultants say, again, 2 years ago this article was written, the traditional Medicaid program is growing at an unsustainable pace, displacing other critical services such as education, public safety, and criminal justice. End quote. So cuts and cost-saving measures have been proposed to hold back tax increases or cuts in basic state services. But before the cuts are even adopted, politicians want to spend the claimed savings on another program, Medicaid expansion. Governor Asa Hutchinson wants to take Medicaid cuts or reforms, use the savings of $835 million over 5 years to help pay for Medicaid expansion. This does not keep Medicaid expansion from costing you money. All it does is hasten the day when your Arkansas taxes will increase to pay for traditional Medicaid. This scheme allows supporters of government dependents to grab the money of Medicaid expansion and then shift the blame to traditional Medicaid when your taxes go up. And traditional Medicaid is for the truly needy. And they'll demagogue it and ignore the fact that they've, robbed that program and used it to pay for able-to-work adults. It is all about posturing and fooling Arkansans with a blame game. Politicians know Arkansans do not want to increase taxes for Medicaid expansion. Therefore, politicians are claiming to fund it with savings in traditional Medicaid. As the costs of traditional Medicaid continue to increase, the $835 million will be gone, and the need for more of your tax money will be blamed on traditional Medicaid instead of the controversial Medicaid expansion program. Now, this was a prediction that was made in this article, again, 2 years ago. I think it's brilliant that this has been brought back up into the minds of people who are subscribing to Conduit News and the Conduit for Action Facebook page. Time will tell as we get further in the distance increases from this when this article was written in January of 2016. It'll be interesting to see what they say. Now, I have long said that they'll take it from education or law enforcement to fund it. And they're doing that too. And then for them it'll be an issue of, okay, which pain point political issue do you want to use to demagogue? Which one do you want to use? You want to say, if you don't vote for this grocery tax increase, if you don't vote for this church tax increase, if you don't vote for the statewide property tax, you don't love our teachers, or you don't love our state law enforcement, right? Which one is it going to be? This is a game to them. It really is. This article goes on. Let's take a break. We'll finish it up when we come back. Again, we got Tim Loggins coming up at 6:30. This is very interesting stuff in this flashback article written 2 years ago. Don't go anywhere, folks. Back in a minute. Who's next to Zipline?
Me, and I'm really excited about this.
Sir, I'm sorry. The Zipline has a 350-pound weight limit, and frankly, I do not think it would be safe for you.
Oh, that's okay. I self-identify as 180 pounds, so it's cool.
Sir, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm afraid we can't let you ride the Zipline. You're too heavy. I'm sorry.
I can't believe this. I thought we had evolved as a society. I thought this was America, but I guess this is just my plight. First slavery, and now fat shaming.
Sir, again, I'm really sorry.
You listen to me. If you don't let me ride, not only will I sue this company for discrimination, I will sue you for damages because right now my feelings are so hurt and I feel embarrassed because I'm holding up the line.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Watch it, mister.
Look, okay, I'm sorry. I just don't think it would be safe for you.
You don't understand. I self-identify as skinny. So you have to let me ride the zip line. The Constitution says so. I get to define my own reality.
Okay, fine, whatever. Ride the zip line. Mike, let this man ride the zip line.
Thank you. Now watch as my self-identity trumps your bigotry. See you on the other side, racist. Here I go! Doctor, thank goodness. What's the prognosis?
Sir, we've done everything we can, and you only have seconds to live.
No, you cannot say that. I do not self-identify as a dead person.
PHP parody. Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Death and taxes. Right. Certainty. What's certain in this life? Death and taxes. Oh, man, just kind of finishing up here. Anyway, I kind of think we did, kind of looking over the rest of this article, what kind of shell game are they going to play here in the future? But I will tell you, we do have big news. I'm going to cover this more at 7, coming up here at 7 o'clock. But there was huge news yesterday concerning Arkansas and abortion. There's a big contrast between what Ireland did by legalizing abortion over the weekend. Again, more about it at 7. But you have the United States Supreme Court has refused to hear a lawsuit, basically, over a 2015 Arkansas law that effectively puts an immediate end to pill-induced abortions or abortifacients. This is a huge, huge victory, and you have to give everybody credit for this who has worked so hard and tirelessly and voted and led on the pro-life issue. For example, when Governor Asa Hutchinson defunded Planned Parenthood of the Heartland, what a great move that was. In the wake of the baby body parts videos of them being sold and basically auctioned off over a nice glass of Chardonnay at a lunch. I mean, it was just disgusting. And he made, he defunded. And then, of course, back in 2015, they were, working hard on pro-life laws. And, of course, what did the liberals say? You're wasting our tax dollars because it's going to be found unconstitutional. You can't do this or that. Well, the United States Supreme Court has refused to hear it. So at least for the moment, those legal fees and everything else, defending the life of the unborn, worth it. Totally worth it. It also gives Arkansas the distinction of being the first state in the country to, in essence, ban medication abortions, these chemical abortions. Now, it's not over. This is very positive news for anybody who's trying to save as many, innocent children as you can, human life as you can. But I guess Planned Parenthood, they're now going back to the lower district court, and they're going to ask that because the Supreme Court rejected the case, said they're not going to hear it, they're now going to try to get the ban or the injunction reapplied, which will be interesting, but I don't necessarily know if that's going to happen or not. Baker, I guess U.S. District Judge Christine Baker, previously ruled that the access burdens created by the law outweighed its safety concerns and that the practices in place at the abortion clinics were sufficient to ensure the patients received continuity of care after leaving the clinic. It says, but a 3-judge panel at the 8th Circuit based in St. Louis said July 28th that Baker needed to make more specific findings about how many women are likely to be burdened as a result. Anyway, the bottom line is huge win here for the state of Arkansas when it comes to pro-life laws. And I just want you guys to remember, back in the 90s, a lot of our fellow Arkansans thought abortion was completely fine. Back in just a moment. We're talking with Kyle Boyd. This is our Young Conservative segment where we kind of highlight future conservatives. So, Kyle, tell me about conservatism politically. When you hear that word in a political context, what does it mean to you? Because sometimes it can mean different things to different people.
Sure, absolutely. I think one of the best ways that I think of it is it's simplicity. I think the government should be limited to its most simple functions, to its most necessary functions, and then we should as Americans have the right to live our life and do the things that we want to do without the government interfering. So I think conservative is about making everything simple, about getting all the complexities of government and all that kind of stuff out of the way, and just living by common sense deals. Now we need government. Obviously, there are some things that we need government for. We need them to help provide the common defense and to do certain things. But honestly, when it comes to business, I work in a small business. Our company we have 9 manufacturing facilities. 8 of those are in Arkansas. 1 of those is in Louisiana. We're the largest concrete masonry unit manufacturer in the state of Arkansas. I want government to get out of the way so our business can grow, and so the simple things that government can do without getting in the way and convoluting the system, that's what I want when I think of being conservative and having a conservative political view. It is trying to let the individual govern themselves to as much extent as possible and getting the government out of the way.
Yeah, I can't agree. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, you are exactly right, and I'm really glad that you brought up the small business aspect of it. As being a CFO, I think you obviously see the money coming in, the money going out, the money going to the government, and so when the government comes back, I mean, specifically here in Arkansas, we have seen Republican-led legislature raise our taxes and attempt to raise them even more, and you stop and think, well, we're already giving you money to do these things. And if you would just fulfill the stuff that we all agree on, like building roads, instead, we come up with new programs and new ways of dependency, and it just gets frustrating. And I think they're mismanaging our money. Let me ask you this, Kyle. How do you feel about what it's the overwhelming philosophy today among our leaders here in Arkansas and other states as well? And it's what they call economic development. And in many
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
I want to remind you guys, this part of the program brought to you by the Patriots of Act 746. Look them up on Facebook, the Patriots of Act 746. They're on a mission to educate Arkansans on your Second Amendment rights, specifically permitless carry, constitutional carry here in Arkansas, and the fact that our laws allow for this. And you should join their group. I'm told that so many people are finding out about the Patriots of Act 746 right here on this program, and they're joining. They're asking for the Facebook, the admins to be a member. You have to ask to be a member of the group. But if you go to Facebook and search for it, you're going to find out more about what your gun rights are here in Arkansas. And this is one of the ways that we're getting the word out is just by telling folks about this great group, and I want to thank them for existing. And here's a member right here on the phone. We got Tim Loggins, Tim, I just want to remind everybody what y'all's mission is, and I want to say thank you for being involved and engaged here doing this.
It's really an honor for me, Paul. I don't need any thanks. I'm so proud to be part of this organization and helping spread and educate the law to Arkansans. I'm proud to be part of it.
Well, so let's talk about a case we mentioned last week. We had Whit Hyman on, and he was doing a good job telling us about it. But, there was an incident in Greenbrier where you have a guy who was charged with possession of a weapon, and it didn't seem like the well, let me just say, both people maybe didn't do themselves any favors, but the law enforcement officer during a stop was alarmed because you had the guy in the car thought that he needed to unload his weapon, and so the officer, and put it on the dash, and the officer heard, of course, the discharge, the unloading of the weapon there, and then he kind of got, worried and suspicious and ended up charging the guy with a crime here. But, of course, under the law, there is no way that you can prove that he was carrying with a unlawful intent, and that's the standard you have to meet now here in the state, right?
That's correct, Paul. It's unlawful intent to use the weapon against a person, not just unlawful intent to, engage in unlawful activity. It's unlawful intent to use the weapon against a person. That's straight out of 573-120, the statute on carrying a weapon. Let me give you a little bit of background. I was tagged on a Facebook post by this young gentleman the day he got stopped. And so I reached out to him, and I actually called him and talked to him on the telephone. And putting it on the dash, talking to this young man, and I say young man, he's probably 26, 27. He's got family and friends that are law enforcement officers there in Conway, and that's what they had told him to do if he's ever stopped by law enforcement. Unload the weapon and put it on the dash. He didn't think about the sound of the slide rack and the concern that would cause an officer. He was doing what he was told was appropriate. Mm-hmm. Had absolutely zero unlawful intent. Now, is that naive? Yes. Is that potentially dangerous? Yes. Is it stupid? Well, yeah. Okay, but he was doing what he was told. He thought he was, following the law. He'd been out of the county working on a job site, 40, 50, 60 miles away. He lives there in Conway. And by the way, I say that because part of the statute, one of the defenses of 573-120 is being on a journey. If you have no unlawful intent, you're covered. And oh, by the way, an additional defense is being on a journey. And the chief of police in Greenbrier actually asked him, "Are you on a journey?" And he said, "Yes, sir. I just got back from a job site." And he named the town where he was at. And the chief told him, "Well, that's not a journey. That's a job."
Oh, wow. Now, come on. Really? Are they that? Do they really? I mean, that's just being combative. I mean, that's being so arbitrary, That's, I mean, why would...
I don't even know what to say to that, Paul.
Yeah, why would they do that? That's so frustrating. And so this is a problem. So let's talk about this. Your former law enforcement, Tim, and I love our law enforcement. I love what they do and how they do, put their lives on the line. But, this is a law-abiding citizen who's working, and really this is, I think, a level of harassment at this point. And I want these law enforcement officers, all of them, to get on board with what the law actually says so that people can have their human right of self-defense. And that's not happening right now.
Well, Paul, let me put this in context. Imagine you're driving down the road and you get pulled over for expired tags. That's what happened in this case. You are guilty. Your tags are expired. And the officer gets mad at you during the interaction, and he writes you a speeding ticket. And you tell him, "But, sir, I was doing 55, which is the speed limit." And he says, "I know, but I'm writing you a speeding ticket anyway." The young man was following the law, 573-120, and still got cited. He was doing what the law said. And I've talked to law enforcement administrators all over the state, especially in Northeast Arkansas, but all over the state. I've talked to the director of the Law Enforcement Academy about this issue. Law enforcement knows what the law says. There is no confusion. They understand what the law is. And quite honestly, you've got a few officers that are using this manufactured confusion to intimidate people into a political position that they feel is more appropriate. You have a few officers that are abusing the statute. And that's got to stop because, that's making Arkansans less safe because you got people that, hey, if I follow the law, I'm still going to get a ticket. So I'm scared to carry.
Now
they
I'm
can't
scared to
afford to
carry.
get a
Yeah.
permit. Getting a permit's fairly costly. And so you're breeding this distrust of law enforcement, and you're making Arkansans less safe. Just a few officers are doing it. If it was the majority of officers, there'd be people getting stopped every day and getting a carrying a weapon charge, and it's not happening. It just happens occasionally, and it never goes to court. By the way, the prosecutor in that area is on record saying they're not going to prosecute anyone for carrying a weapon absent criminal intent.
Yep.
So this isn't going to court. It's just harassment.
Yeah.
Because that officer, by the way, that's running for sheriff, that officer got scared and got mad. And so he just threw an extra charge on there.
So
and that's got to stop.
You're saying that this guy, was it the chief of police for Greenbrier? Is that correct?
No, sir. The chief was actually present during the stop.
Okay.
The officer that wrote the ticket is a sheriff's candidate up there. And he's the one that approached the vehicle. He made the initial stop, and he heard the slide rack. And, I'm gonna have a little conjecture here. He probably got a little rattled, and it angered him.
Mm-hmm.
And so he stuck a carrying a weapon charge on. And it shouldn't be that way. If I'm driving down the road at 55 and I get stopped and somehow I make that officer mad, he shouldn't still be able to charge me for speeding if I'm not.
Right.
And that's what happened in this case. He didn't break the law.
Yeah.
He had zero unlawful intent. And, oh, by the way, he was even on a journey.
Right. So, and they're not going to pursue charges. The prosecutor's not going to pursue charges here. So so this is a level of harassment. And actually, you open yourself up to lawsuits when you when you do stuff like this as a law enforcement officer. And so I know that maybe that's even a possibility that people are thinking of. You use the word, Tim, confusion. And, we're trying to cut through that confusion. The Patriots VAC 746, you guys are trying to cut through that confusion. But it's very difficult. And one of the reasons it's difficult is because we have people in the highest political office who have made things more confusing. I mean, you have the governor who's got a faulty definition of what the constitutional carry is. And unfortunately, we're still waiting on an attorney general opinion, and that makes things very confusing. But they could really help things and set the record straight if they wanted to.
They could end this confusion today, and I call upon the attorney general and the governor to do so. Senator Linda Collins-Smith has had a request for an opinion in for almost 6 months now, and the attorney general still has not answered or issued an opinion. And it's a very simple question. What law says you have to have a permit to carry concealed, and what punishment if you carry concealed without a permit? That's a simple law question. And I don't know if it's, they don't believe in the individual right to keep and bear arms, if they don't believe in the Constitution, or if it's simply political calculations. I don't know. But they can end this confusion tomorrow. When you talk to prosecutors, when you talk to chiefs of police, when you talk to sheriffs, they know what the law says. If you don't have unlawful intent to use that weapon against a person, you're not guilty of the charge of carrying a weapon. That's what the law says.
Yeah.
If they don't like the law, let's change the law. And oh, by the way, I'm not in favor of that. Well, let's follow the law.
Yeah, and
let's tell people what the law is.
That letter from Senator Linda Collins-Smith, it is a straight. There's really no way to answer that without the chief, the attorney general, without her essentially, publicly affirming what we're saying right now, right? Because there is no penalty, right? You guys still have like $1,000 reward if you can find where that is in Arkansas law, right?
That's correct. We posted on Facebook an open, I guess you'd call it bounty or lottery. If you can show us the law that says you have to have a permit to conceal carry, and if you can show us a punishment for carrying concealed without a permit. And no one has even come close to claiming it because the law doesn't exist. It's just not there.
And yet we've been psychologically conditioned somehow to believe that we have to have these permission slips from the government in Arkansas in order to carry. It's really fascinating when you think about it. I mean, that's a pretty big, it's like we've been brainwashed in a way.
Well, and, law enforcement occasionally uses this as an additional charge to tack on they stop someone and they got possession of marijuana, or they've got whatever, small charge, they'll throw carrying a weapon in if they've got a weapon on them, which I find kind of sad because, our prison system is in crisis. Our county jails are full. Parole officers can't even violate parolees for possession of drugs. They can't send them back to prison because there's no room. But then we're going to waste the time of the criminal justice system to add a charge that's going to eat up time, eat up money, force me to get an attorney, and it's going to be dropped. Mm-hmm. That's just wrong.
Yeah, let's just
follow the law.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. That is a waste of resources, and when we're talking about this concept of his tags were expired. Okay, that's a very common thing, but he was a law-abiding citizen when it comes to carrying a weapon, and yet he gets slapped with it just because there was a socially awkward interaction. And that's maybe an understatement. Like, obviously, if you hear that gun, that slide, roll back, yeah, okay. But then when you figure out that it's okay, that there's not a threat, okay, well, yeah, sure. Tell them to never do it again. Say that the guys, shouldn't have done that. But then to just basically arbitrarily use your authority to put the weapons charge on them is just, it's sad. And so, Tim, tell us, so what actually is going to happen? You said he is going to get an attorney, but they're not going to drop, or they are going to drop the charges. And so where do we go from here, Tim?
Well, I'm not going to speak for the prosecutor on this case. Maybe they'll go ahead and try to prosecute and we can finally get a precedent.
That'd be great.
On the books. But that prosecutor has been on record saying they're not going to prosecute, they're not going to waste taxpayer money prosecuting carrying a weapon unless there's unlawful intent. So I don't see this case going to court. The prosecutor's already said they won't do it. Mm-hmm. Now they might, and we might get a good precedent out of it.
Yeah, and that's that's the one thing that we haven't had yet, because the law is written the way it is. When you do have these law enforcement officers, these few law enforcement officers who are making errors, and really, again, I think what you say is true, Tim. That's going to make us be like, well, maybe I shouldn't even, maybe I shouldn't open carry then. Maybe I like, because the law enforcement may harass me, even though I'm within my rights, but then I'm going to have to go through all these, court proceedings and things like that. Man, it's just such a sad situation here. And I'm glad that we're bringing, that you guys are coming on and bringing this to light, because it needs to be. But the one thing, again, that's what I was trying to say. The one thing that hasn't happened yet is a precedent. We don't actually have a prosecutor that's tried to get a conviction, and a judge looking at the law and being like, sorry guys, this is now, a court precedent, not just written in the statute.
And unfortunately, that's where we're at, because prosecutors won't try it because they know it's a loser. Mm-hmm. But law enforcement continues to make the charge. And what almost always happens is either the offender will plead guilty, not knowing their rights, or if they plead not guilty, then that charge is dropped. Even if they got other charges, the carrying a weapon won't stick unless you have unlawful intent to deploy that weapon on a person. Yeah. And that's almost impossible to prove that, by the way, unless you admit, I was going to kill, my friend.
Right, exactly. Man, we almost need we need a prosecutor that that agrees with the idea that we need a loser. We need a precedent. You need a prosecutor to just kind of take one for the team here and go. I mean, I know maybe that's a bad idea, but I'm saying, it would be interesting if you had something like that going on. But anyway, hey, Tim, I appreciate you coming on the program, sir. And, let's talk about, you guys have a meeting coming up, right?
June 9th at Tamales in Jonesboro, the Northeast Arkansas chapter, which we started in November, right at 1st of December. Mm-hmm. 2:30, June 9th at Tamales, we'll have a meet and greet. So far, I've reached out to Representative Jimmy Gasaway and Representative Brant Smith. Both of them said they're going to try and make the meeting. And it's just where we sit down and talk about issues that we're having and spread the message and spread the word. It's open to the public. Welcome anyone to please come drop in. Come chat with us.
All right, so June the 9th at 2 o'clock. Sounds good at Tamales. All right, well, Tim, I always love having you on, sir, and talking about this stuff. And you have no problem getting up early with me in the morning, and so I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Paul, for allowing me to be part of this Liberty machine.
All righty. Yes, you're always welcome, Tim. Tim Loggins, everybody. Folks, give us a phone call, 870-275-9799. Our whiteboard, by the way, just if you're just joining us, we do have a new whiteboard up in studio. It says principle, not personality. That's principle, not personality. Coming up at 7:05, let's talk about the huge win for pro-life advocates here in Arkansas. The U.S. Supreme Court deciding not to hear a case that banned abortion-inducing drugs. And so right now that means that you can't, now the state can enforce this law of saying, look, we don't believe that these pills, these medical abortions, we don't believe that they're right. And so that's certainly a very, very positive thing when it comes to saving the lives and respecting the lives of the unborn. And we also want to talk and contrast that between what happened in Arkansas yesterday versus what happened all the way over across the pond in the country of Ireland, and how they voted to legalize abortion. We'll give you that contrast coming up at 7:05. We're going to take a break. Be back in just a second.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
This is ASA News, The Parrot, with breaking news from the Capitol in Little Rock. I'm Bob Maloney. There are reports circling around from politicians who are in the know, and the same phrase keeps being used. That phrase is new revenue generation. Let's go to our reporter on the ground from the Capitol, Haley Hogwash. Haley?
Thanks, Bob. Yes, it seems the more politicians I talk to, the more I hear the phrase new revenue generation. We're trying to figure out exactly what that means, but you can rest assured it will be good for the people of Arkansas.
Haley, it certainly sounds like something good. I like how the phrase uses the word generation. That makes me think this has got to be doing something positive for our children in the future. Haley?
Yes, Bob, some new developments. I've just been speaking to some people who are here and are not politicians, and they tell me the phrase new revenue generation is actually code for a new tax.
Oh, my. Well, if this is true, Haley, That would add to a growing list of new taxes that have barely made any headlines at all, so it's best not to discuss them here on ASA News, the Parrot.
Yes, Bob, I know it's sure to make government officials angry that their phrasing of the new revenue generation has been changed by the people and called a tax increase.
I would expect an announcement from Mother Government soon to set the record straight. What is the new tax? Revenue generation, Haley?
Well, this new tax, a new revenue generation would add to a growing list. First, there was a revenue generation on movies, books, and songs that people download using the internet. And next, there was the tax increase. I'm sorry, Bob, the new revenue generation on all purchases made using the internet. And now I'm told this new revenue generation is a tax on the people's patience.
I realize the people don't like it, Haley, but specifically, what is the new tax? Revenue generation.
No, Bob, I'm telling you, according to the activists here at the Capitol who have gathered and are listening to some radio broadcast, the revenue generation is literally taxing the patience of the people of Arkansas. I'm told the less patience you have with the government
better not tax our patience.
The more they will tax your patience and the more money you will owe at a later date. I'm also told the collection method on taxing your patients will be decided in a newly formed multicolored ribbon task force.
How taxing.
PHP Parody. Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yes, we're trying to be the conduit, a free flow of information to the people. And that is what we are accomplishing here, just really being on the air every single day with Conduit News Radio. And of course, we're going to try to pick up on these little stab reports that we do throughout the day. So if you are a subscriber to, let's say, Facebook or YouTube, which I would really appreciate, both. I really would appreciate a subscription to YouTube. We're trying to build the YouTube channel, and it is, we haven't been able to put the amount of attention we want. I mean, things have been moving, I guess, since January, just a million miles a minute, it seems like. It's crazy that the year is half over, pretty much, with June approaching. But so I would just say, please go subscribe. Just go to YouTube. If you don't have a YouTube account, get one. I mean, most people do. If you have a Google account, most people, it cycles over to YouTube as well because they're all watching us. But go to YouTube and subscribe and click the little bell to get notifications. So what I mean by that is stories break during the day. We want to be able to go ahead and give you the news right then and there. So if during the course of your day you are used to seeing Facebook notifitions around 6 a.m. saying, hey, look, Facebook's live, or if you're used to getting YouTube notifications saying, hey, Conduit News is live right now, if you get those during the day, just know that means that we've got something we want to tell you. I mean, that means that, hey, yeah, we are live and there's something else that needs to happen. And while we're not on terrestrial radio, we are on the social media, and putting that out there for you guys. So just keep that in mind. Hey, folks, the telephone number, 870-275-9799. Arkansas having a very good day yesterday with these big pro-life victories and the ban on the abortifacients and the U.S. Supreme Court saying, look, we're not going to hear the case. That is very, very good. Listen, when we come back, we're going to contrast what happens when you stick to your principles. What can happen when you stick to your principles, and what can happen when you don't stick to your principles. We've got an analysis comparing Arkansas and Ireland you're not going to hear anywhere else. Be back in just a moment.
Talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
When the government comes back, I mean, specifically here in Arkansas, we have seen, Republican-led legislature raise our taxes and attempt to raise them even more. And, you stop and think, well, we're already giving you money to do these things. And, and if you would just fulfill the stuff that we all agree on, like building roads, instead, we come up with new programs and new ways of dependency, and it just gets frustrating. And I think they're mismanaging our money. Let me ask you this, Kyle. How do you feel about what it's the overwhelming philosophy today among our leaders here in Arkansas and other states as well? And it's what they call economic development. And in many cases, their definition of economic development is taking your taxpayer money that you're sending to Arkansas, and then they give it away to company A or B that's outside, and in most recent cases, a couple companies from China, and they get to come here with our tax dollars. And I'm just wondering, wouldn't it be better if we just eliminated the Arkansas corporate tax? And quit doing that, and then just treat all of our existing businesses and let them flourish and reinvest. And we've already seen that with the tax cut, the giant corporate tax cut we got nationally. How many people got bonuses? How many, Apple investing all these billions of dollars? What do you think about that?
Well, I think economic development is a lot of times a fancy term to say we're going to take money out of successful people's hands and we're going to put it in the hands of people who are running businesses who couldn't make it without government coming in and subsidizing it, and usually that's because somewhere else down the road there's a payday for someone else who's helping them get that money. Our business, hey, look, the Arkansas Economic Development Committee is not coming out to ABC Block and Brick and saying, hey, how can we give you guys taxpayers money to increase your business? We're going out there every day and we're hustling.
Yeah.
We're finding sales and we're looking at ways that we can cut costs and increase our bottom line so that we can pay our employees. We have all together between our owner, we're a privately owned company, all between ABC Block and Brick and a couple other companies that we have about 300 employees all together, and we take great pride in being able to provide them with good livings and all that kind of stuff, and good benefits but yeah, we're paying money, and we don't mind. We don't mind paying our share on a corporate basis to hey, look, we've got a fleet of about 40 big rigs and tractor trailers, and so we use the roads, we use these kinds of things. So we rely on those, and we have no problem with paying our share to help that kind of stuff. But when you're taking our money, and like you said, there's companies that are coming into Arkansas from China and from these other countries, and we're using taxpayer dollars to fund them and to help them succeed, but we're not taking care of our small business owners. We're not taking care of that. So I do think that there is a lot of mismanagement, like you said, of funds. And I'm not at the point where I want to say we need to get rid of a corporate tax rate or anything like that completely, because I do think we've prospered by the people who work in, and so we need to pay our share to benefit those things. But the money that comes in, whether it's local or federal tax dollars that are coming in, there's gross mismanagement of funds. I'll just tell you this. I look at things like, for instance, the United States Postal Service, which constantly runs with a negative, in the red. And if ABC Block, if I ran the company like that, I either get fired or our whole company would go bankrupt. You know what I mean? So only the government is allowed to run, fiscally irresponsible. Those of us out here in the small business world, we know what it's like. We know what it's like to make the hard calls and say, hey, the money's not here, or go through the recession. We're in the construction products industry, so during the recession, it hit us hard, and I know what it's like to have employees come to you and say, hey, I need a raise, I need to make more money so I can support my family, and to have to look at them and say, hey, right now is the time we're all making cuts. We can't do it. But now that the economy's back rolling again, now that the tax reform legislation has been passed out, our company's able to look at things and say, hey, we can give some of our we can do some employee bonuses and raises and things like that. we're better. The small business owner who's a successful small business. Now, there's people get into entrepreneurial endeavors who make big mistakes and don't know how to manage their own capital. But the successful small businesses like ABC Block and Brick aren't.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Hour number 2. Thanks so much for being with us. Really glad to be here. We have a good hour for you. We're going to talk a little bit about, well, first of all, you heard about the Women's Summit, that there's a Women's Summit. We'll tell you about this later on in the show in more detail. There apparently is a Women's Summit, World Women's Summit, going to take place at the Clinton Presidential Center. Have you heard about this? World Women's Summit 2018 at the Clinton Presidential Center. Apparently, it's in October of this year. I'm not really familiar with the World Women's Summit is. Never heard of them before. But I do find it a little bit ironic that it's at the Clinton Presidential Center. Huh. I wonder if Juanita Broderick is going to be one of the speakers there. You think? No, you got to. Okay, you have to be the right. I guess the right kind of woman to speak. Okay. Anyway, we'll have more on that here in a little bit. Arkansas having a good day yesterday. If you're pro-life, Arkansas is now the most pro-life. We're the only state now that has restrictions on abortifacients. Thanks to those are abortion-inducing drugs. Thanks to the United States Supreme Court refusing to hear the lawsuit. Challenging the 2015 law, which means that at this point, Arkansas is the most pro-life state in the country. I think it's very clear. So kudos to everybody involved. If you are, this has been something I call a low-hanging fruit issue, being pro-life, because I think most Arkansans now are pro-life, and our leaders reflect that. I want you to remember, though, back in the 1990s, I think there was a lot of our fellow Arkansans that believed our abortion was fine or subscribed to maybe a kind of a, hey, just don't ask, don't tell type policy. There's been a lot of outreach with pregnancy resource centers, forging relationships with people in the middle of a crisis pregnancy. They're deciding to keep the babies. There are fewer and fewer abortions taking place because of that. They're making relationships. There's also psychological implications for women who do go through with an abortion, and some of the sometimes feelings of regret and pain that they carry for the rest of their lives. And there's outreach. There's outreach for those people. There's people who have, because of these pregnancy resource centers, they've also seen the power, the healing power of Jesus and the gospel in their lives when it comes to what true righteousness is. There's some really good stuff happening, and I feel like this ruling and this thing with the abortifacients is just very welcome news. And so give the state, give everybody credit in this 2015. Give the governor credit for this law as well. You have to in this context because this is very big news. Now, there's a chance that Planned Parenthood and these people go to the lower court and ask for an injunction or a ban to be reinstated on this. So there's a chance that something like that would happen, but we'll see. I know they're going to ask for it. According to reports, they're going to ask for it. I want to contrast that with what happened in Ireland over the weekend, because this, ladies and gentlemen, is extremely sad. While Arkansas has this big victory for us, and we've come a long way convincing our friends and neighbors the value of life, which should be self-evident. Ireland voted to strike down their abortion ban from the 1980s. Dublin. Irish voters overwhelmingly repealed a constitutional ban on abortions and asked the country's parliament to enact laws that reflect the popular will and make abortions legal in the country for the first time. Final results from a historic referendum that took place on Saturday. Voters in Friday's referendum, hang on. Okay, so they had the results on Saturday. So voters in Friday's referendum supported rescinding the ban adopted in 1983 as the Eighth Amendment to the Irish Constitution by 66.4% to 33.6%. The final count showed the size of the win for abortion rights exceeded expectations and was cast as a historic victory for women's rights, but not babies' rights, women's rights. Before the referendum, the government had pledged to pass legislation by the end of the year to allow unrestricted terminations up to 12 weeks if the amendment was set aside. Prime Minister Leo Varadkar, speaking after the official tally was announced at the crowd in Dublin Castle, hailed the monumentous outcome as a, quote, once-in-a-generation vote. Boy, once-in-a-generation vote. Well, using the word generation there, because you're going to be affecting future generations for sure that are not going to be allowed to exist now. The wrenching pain of decades of mistreatment of Irish women cannot be unlived. However, today, we have ensured that it does not have to be lived again. Wow, some of those words, the operative word in that last sentence would be lived. The decades of pain, the mistreatment of Irish women, well, at least they were alive to be mistreated. If you say, I mean, let's assume that they were mistreated. At least they're alive to be mistreated. And they'll never have to live it again, will they? Again, contrast this between Arkansas. And I'm very glad that we do live in a pro-life state, even if we do have to fight for it in the courts. Quote, no more doctors telling their patients there is nothing that can be done for them in their own country. No more lonely journeys from across the Irish Sea. No more stigma. The veil of secrecy is lifted. No more isolation. The burden of shame is gone. So the burden of shame is gone. Wow. Killing the unborn, they just proclaimed in Ireland, is shameless. There's no guilt in it. I feel so sorry for this country. I feel so sorry for what they've done. And here's the contrast that I really want to make. If you scroll further down, they write this: the vote followed months of soul-searching in a country where the legacy of the Catholic Church remains powerful. It was the latest and harshest in a string of rejection of the Church's authority in recent years. The next paragraph is telling. Ask yourself the question, why is Ireland rejecting the Church's authority here, the Catholic Church's authority? The Church lost much of its credibility in the wake of scandals involving pedophile priests and thousands of unwed mothers who were placed into servitude or mental asylums as recently as the mid-1990s. The Church was, in fact, largely absent from the referendum campaign. Anti-abortion campaigners actively discouraged its participation, preferring to emphasize moral values and human rights rather than religion, possibly to avoid being tarnished by the church-related scandals. So we have here, even the people who are fighting for life say we don't want the church involved because you're not credible, because of the pedophilia. What a sad day for the country of Ireland. What does that say about commitment to principles? And now, in this case, we're talking about a very biblical principle, very simple principle of life. It's also a very simple political principle. I mean, you can find it in the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is actually a very theological document because it recognizes a higher power, the Creator, and establishes our country firmly beneath him. So, this is, I started to think about this in relation to the Arkansas Republican Party and a backlash. Now, keep in mind, they added this amendment to the Irish Constitution in the 80s. And they said, you know what? This was back when Arkansas was, there was many of our neighbors that thought, oh, abortion's perfectly fine. Many people sitting in churches every Sunday thinking that abortion is perfectly fine as a means of birth control, that it's perfectly fine. In the 80s, Ireland said no abortions. And they put an amendment to their constitution. Things are so much different for our state and their country now. And why? Why is it? Well, the Catholic Church here has shown that they weren't very respectful of the lives of little boys. So why should we listen to them when it comes to their views on the value of the unborn? See, when you have that hypocrisy, there's a huge backlash, and you lose credibility. You lose credibility. So they could point to the Bible, or they could point to a biblical principle, and they could say, see here, see this, but then you look at what has gone on, what is obviously a huge deal, not just in Ireland, but worldwide. And, I mean, I saw where 33 Chilean bishops resigned the other day. Did you see that? And so this is very interesting. So I want to take it down from Ireland, and I do want to talk to the Republican Party of Arkansas because I think there is a correlation that you can make here. If you don't stick to your principles and you don't attempt to apply them equally to every aspect, there can be a huge backlash. Now, part of that backlash I've been saying is that the media will play a huge role if we continue to grow the size of government here in the state of Arkansas. Right? And again, this takes a lot of education. We told you that, in the 90s, I think where we were in the 90s and 80s in Arkansas on abortion is where we are now on economic and fiscal issues and limited government issues. I think there's still people that just don't understand the pitfalls of big government, out of control spending, things like that. I think they will get there. I think we can get there. And good tax policy and sound regulatory policy that doesn't disincentivize, our small business owners from doing what they want to do in creating jobs and that sort of thing. A concept that government doesn't create jobs. These are basic conservative concepts. At some point, I have said, though, if we continue to grow government, we're going to get bad results, and the media will then turn on the establishment Republicans and call them conservatives and say, we tried your conservative ideas, we have to go back, and the pendulum will swing very far back to the left, possibly. This is my fear. But, I mean, if you take what's happened with what apparently in Ireland is a less and less credible Catholic Church on this issue, and this is what is kind of my whole point. If you take that and you look at the Republican Party platform and you look at what it says versus what we have done or what we are continuing to do, I mean, my goodness. I mean, how many times do you have to say, well, okay, well, yeah, the Republican Party is supposed to stand for less government dependency. Okay, all right, less government dependency. But yet we have Republicans who have made the decision to keep and promote more government dependency, specifically with Medicaid expansion. Okay, you have that going. The Republican Party says no increased taxes. Okay, yet because we violated that first principle of the welfare, we've got to now continue to pay for the growing welfare rolls. We try to tweak it here and there, but you know what? We still are going to have more revenue, and so we try to pass an internet sales tax. We try to pass a gas tax. We succeed at passing a digital downloads tax. We succeed at passing a tire tax and another tire tax. We succeed at passing increased taxes on candy and soda. And now we have a task force that's looking at ending tax exemptions on churches, tax increase, that look to raise a grocery tax, and even look to raise a grocery tax and create a new welfare program for those who are lower income. At what point do you lose all of your credibility when you claim to support and you claim to lecture? The pendulum can swing back, and I don't want it to. I don't want it to. You know why? Because I see opportunity. That's what we should be looking at right now. It is great that I can sit here and say that abortion in Arkansas is a low-hanging fruit issue, and most of us now agree that, yes, we need to protect life at conception, right? Life at conception. Notice this. Notice I'm not saying, do you believe in life at conception? Because if they found a fertilized egg on Mars, the headline in the paper the next day would be, life found on another planet. Like, that's what it would be. It's an oxymoron to say, I don't believe life begins at conception. Look up what the word conception means. It is great that we are a pro-life state. And so things are a lot better here on that, and that we can sit here and say it's a low-hanging fruit issue. That is really, really good. And thank you to all who were involved, all of our legislators that voted for that 2015 law. Thank you, guys. That's great. You did because it's so obvious. The harder things to agree on are the rest of that platform, apparently. Now, not necessarily in other states. That's not to say that there's never been a Republican that's, voted for a tax increase. Obviously, there are. But we have a lot of opportunity here to show the people of Arkansas the benefits of more freedom and less government. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, are we doing that to the best of our ability? And I can tell you that the answer is no. No, you're not. For the reasons I just listed. We don't want a backlash. We don't want a backlash. But I can promise you, the leftists in media and the leftists at the Marble Palace, they're plotting one. They're plotting one. We got to take a break. Back in a minute.
Bob Baloney here from ASA News, The Parrot. Breaking news from the Capitol in Little Rock. Over now to our new on-site reporter, Susan Shenanigans. Susan?
Thanks, Bob. The governor has just announced that a Blue Ribbon Task Force is to be formed.
Today, I'm asking your support for a Blue Ribbon Legislative Task Force to be created and directed to recommend further reform.
Now we go live to the chamber to listen in for more information on the task force.
I hereby call this session into order. First on the agenda for today is the formation of the Blue Ribbon Task Force. Is there anyone who would like to give their thoughts on the task force?
Yes, as someone who is deeply conservative, why is the governor choosing the color blue for this task force? Sounds like he's really a Democrat loyalist. Why not a red ribbon to prove he's a true conservative?
Well, I represent Walmart, and we agree with the color of the task force ribbon. The color blue is best consistent with a Walmart brand.
I object to this choice. Blue is the wrong color ribbon for this task force.
Well, who are you?
I am Mr. P.C. Wrights, and I represent Target, and we want the ribbon to be red, not blue.
Hold it right there. This seems like a tough decision. Why not ask the governor to call a special session at a later date for an important decision as this?
I think this is something worth talking about. I motion that we decide the color of the ribbon today.
I second it. Fine. We can decide it now. Does anyone have any other suggestions for the color of the ribbon?
I think the color should be white.
Whoa. Hold on. Definitely not white.
I agree with Mr. P.C. Wrights. Maybe we should choose green for the farmers.
You like the color green because you are a farmer. I think it should be purple, so we can display how Arkansas is an extremely moderate state.
Why are we even discussing this? Shouldn't we be talking about tax reform instead of wasting time with this?
Well, the people have spoken. They believe this is worth talking about, so we are deciding this now.
Excuse me, sir, but shouldn't the color of the ribbon be rainbow to include all types of people?
Please, silence your phones.
I just received a call from Walmart HQ, and they agree with, what was your name again? My name is Fabulous. They agree with Fabulous that the color should be rainbow.
Target concurs with the decision of it being rainbow-colored ribbon.
Is there a motion to make the ribbon rainbow-colored?
I motion to make the color rainbow.
I second the motion. The motion carries because I said so.
The committee will now vote and not be on record to keep the people in the dark. Back to you, Bob.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you for listening to ASA News, The Parrot. Next up, there are reports of a gorilla on top of the Capitol Dome demanding massive sums of taxpayer cash. His name? Medicaid expansion.
PHP Parody. Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, look at this Facebook post. This is Senator Alan Clark. He's a representative senator down there, I guess, in Garland County. Senator Alan Clark says, a 9-0 decision, no noted dissents. Congratulations to my good friend, Senator Linda Collins Smith, who was the Senate sponsor of this bill. Meaning this anti-abortifacient bill of 2015. A few points to be made. Number one, a Republican majority does matter. Number two, we weren't wasting money on legal fees on another pro-life bill that couldn't hold up in court. This is the argument the pro-abortion crowd throws out every time because they want abortion to continue. They are the ones causing the legal fees to be wasted. Number three, 9-0 means no noted dissents. We were not the fanatics as we were slandered to be. Our opponents were. Number four, it's a shame that anyone was trying to remove Linda Collins Smith from office. Ironic that this decision would come down 1 week after they were successful, meaning after the Republican establishment was successful at targeting and defeating Senator Linda Collins Smith, and we have the fruits right here of her tireless work for the unborn. And you know what? Isn't it interesting that our most fiscal conservative, our most conservative legislators who are targeted by the establishment end up being the most conservative on life as well? Kudos to Senator Alan Clark for pointing the victory here for Senator Linda Collins Smith out a week after she lost her re-election bid.
Owner, they can do a whole lot better with the money that they're earning and putting it back into people's pockets and investing in the economy than the government can ever do. And so, let's make sure that small business owners, entrepreneurs, people that go out and have built this country on their backs. Our owner, for instance, he started as a 12-year-old boy laying block and brick with his dad in Whitehall, and now he's got the largest manufacturing, the largest concrete masonry manufacturing company in the state of Arkansas. And that's because he knew how to take his money and invest it and work hard and put it where it needed to go. The government didn't do that for him. And so I said all that to say this is there's a lot of mismanagement of funds. If we put the money back in the hands of the small business owners, they'll do a lot better with growing our economic development for the state and for the country than the government will ever do.
Yeah, it's very, very, very well said. And I certainly appreciate your perspective, your point of view, Mr. Kyle Boyd, and I appreciate you coming on. And I just have one more point to make. And so I totally understand, and I think most people appreciate, we all want to pay our taxes and contribute and do everything. But back to the Arkansas corporate tax rate. If you did eliminate it, just so you know, I want our audience to know this. If you were to eliminate the corporate tax break and you were to eliminate the giving away of taxpayer money to these companies trying to recruit them here, it actually would just offset. If we would just stop doing what we're doing, you could give all these corporations in Arkansas a massive tax break.
Absolutely,
and it would actually offset. I mean, that's pretty incredible. And they're going to debate it. I hope they debate it down there and eventually move on it. But it's doable. The amount of money Arkansas gets off of the corporate tax rate is really not that much money. So anyway,
sure. And you're exactly right. There's always a trade-off, and if we would reduce our wasteful spending, we could. And manage our finances well as a state, we could reduce a lot of things for the taxpayer. Like I said, I believe in the idea of taxes. I don't think that we can have a tax-free state,
correct,
or anything. But you're exactly right on the idea of we could rearrange our spending. We could get rid of a lot of wasteful, mismanaged funds, and we could significantly reduce the burden on the taxpayer.
Yeah. Well, Kyle, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to meet you. I appreciate your perspective. I'd love to do it again sometime, so let's stay in touch.
Well, thank you, Paul. I appreciate the opportunity very much.
Yes, sir. All right, be safe. Folks, that concludes this edition of our Conservative Future segment.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry. Was I on when I was saying am I on, or was my mic not working? Oh, okay. I was on. Okay. I couldn't hear myself for some reason. All right. Folks, first of all, did you see I mentioned it's not the One World Women's Summit, it's the Women's Summit, right? Worldwide Women's Summit. I didn't know anything about this. I saw this on Facebook and I couldn't believe it. And then, it just is what it is. This is where the World Women Foundation posted this on their Facebook page. Get rid of my. So the World Women Foundation, they're excited to announce Governor Asa Hutchinson will make opening remarks at the World Women's Summit 2018. Click on the link. So I clicked on the link here. So governor's going to speak here, which is fine or whatever, but I just thought it was hilarious that it's at the Clinton Presidential Center. And it's taking place October 2018. They say the most influential leaders are here on the global stage. And the only question I have is I don't know what gender harmony means. What is gender harmony? You see it where it says We've got the World Women's Summit 2018. We'll celebrate the doers and the doing at the Clinton Presidential Center. A source of inspiration and support that connects and empowers women around the world. Empowers women around the world, really, at the Clinton Presidential Center. Helping them to realize their potential and reach new heights. Featuring keynote conversations, panel discussions, one-to-one interviews. The 2018 World Women's Summit will bring together the voices and insights of a diverse range of luminaries from the worlds of business, entertainment, science, and technology to accelerate women's leadership in a bold new way through the global movement of gender harmony. The goal of World Women's Summit 2018 will accelerate women's leadership in a bold new way to support the Sustainable Development Goals 2030. Sustainable Development Goals 2030. Hey, Joe, will you do a separate Google search just on that other or somewhere? Google what Sustainable Development Goals 2030 is. The wide-ranging program designed to inspire action and fuel creative fires will span 6 core pillars: entrepreneurship, technology, finance, health, education, and sustainability. So Joe says that the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 are a United Nations project of some kind. Why am I terrified of whatever that is? Can you even have a World Women's Summit anymore? Is that a thing? Can you even have that? Can you have a World Women's Summit and it not? I mean, with the way gender is going, isn't that what if can you speak if you're a man that identifies as a woman? Much less, obviously, we all know that you could never have a man summit, a summit that was just about men being leaders, because that would just, can you imagine?
That would cause too many problems.
That would cause a lot of problems, wouldn't it? Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the Sustainable Development Goals,
Mm-hmm.
it's a UN thing. It says the Sustainable Development Goals 2015 to 2030. There's 17 development goals just for this period of time, and the first one is end poverty in all its forms everywhere. That's the very first one.
Okay. End poverty in all of its forms.
We can do that in 12 years. Got
it. Wouldn't you? I mean, even if you were to do that, wouldn't there just be a next class of poverty? Yeah, like it was like people who have electricity and can feed themselves and have cell phones and everything else. They're now considered to be impoverished. I mean, that certainly happened here in America, where what we consider to be poverty here in America, you live way better than the majority, like the vast majority of the world, if you're impoverished here, with the amount of technology and things like that. But anyway, what an interesting. I want to research more about that. What is it called? The 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, a United Nations project. They're going to be talking about it at the World Women's Summit. And also, I was like, well, why is it at the Clinton Presidential Center? You got to, wonder. You got to wonder what they're thinking there. But there's apparently somebody who's on their board that does work for Walmart, I'm told. Yeah. Why do I want to say World Women's Federation or something? Like it's it's the WWF, man. That's what this is. That's really what it is. Oh, man. In other news today, we have the state granting themselves raises, so that's good. State agencies are allowed to grant performance-based raises to their employees, so that's going to go on now. $27.5 million, Michael Wickline reports. So 2.8% of each agency's total annual base salaries This, of course, the Director of State Department of Finance and Administration, this is what they said on Tuesday in a memo to agency directors. 24,410 state employees are eligible for the performance-based raises effective July 1st, and if each state agency uses all the money that it could for these raises, the total projected cost would be $27.5 million more a year. Scott Harden said he's the spokesperson for the finance department. So you're going to have performance-based raises for state employees. Wouldn't it be good if we had performance-based raises for legislators? But there's this. See there's a committee, right? Thanks to John Woods, thanks to convicted felon John Woods, Senator Woods, we have a committee that is appointed by legislators, a citizen committee appointed by legislators that decide who gets raises or that give legislators these raises, and they all get them. Now, Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin, obviously, he sent his back, or he's rejected his for like the second year in a row, his raise. And so that's, well, let me just put it to you this way. Does anybody have a problem with these task farces, and everything is solved with a task farce, but why can't you get your work done when you're supposed to get your work done? And instead you have a task farce that creates new meeting dates, and every time there's a meeting, that means there's per diem. That means they get to travel to Little Rock, and they get their $150 a day. So they create for themselves more work and more opportunities to make money. It's like, why can't you just do your job within the confines that you're already doing it? See, that would be a good idea. I mean, that would be maybe a consideration if we were to ever have performance-based raises for legislators. Don't you think? Don't you think that might be kind of good? I read somewhere the other day, or loosely, vaguely, there was a task force, some local task force on picking up the trash. You know, at some point, you've actually got to pick up the trash. You know, at some point, you've actually got to not just have meetings, but you actually have to do something. I just think it's interesting to have this extra work they create for themselves, and yet we can't just do the work, do the work within the confines of the existing system. I guess we're just dealing with ideas that are too large, if you will. It's pretty sad. You find out anything else, Joe, about that agenda, or what is it, the 2030? Anything else that piques your interest about what exactly that is? Because you hear this Agenda 21 stuff, it just kind of screams like it's this Agenda 21. Anytime you start talking about sustainable development, I know in Northeast Arkansas they had to reject the International Property Maintenance Code. You remember that? The International Property Maintenance Code. If your local community is trying to adopt the International Property Maintenance Code, you've got to run from it like the plague. It essentially, in an effort to try to guarantee somebody's property value, meaning if you have a home and you're doing these improvements, but let's say your neighbor's not doing these improvements, well, you can then essentially weaponize code enforcement on these people. And they say, well, we'll never do it. We won't ever treat it. It's like, you may not, but what about the guy 10 years from now that's in your position? And they violated Fourth Amendment rights and right to privacy, and they could come in your home. And then they had everything from, you have to have rat guards on your basement. If you have basement windows, you have to have rodent guards on them. And it essentially would weaponize the property code to where you could call on your neighbor and get them in trouble for stuff that they're doing. Have you ever seen the video of the guy who's barbecuing? And I've seen that on Facebook several times. He's barbecuing, and the code enforcement says, we've had complaints. The smoke is drifting, and you can't do that anymore. And the guy's basically told, cited by his own government, that, hey, you can't barbecue here. Then you got the other flip side, somewhere up in the Northeast, that they adopted this same International Property Maintenance Code. And this guy was a veteran, lived in a house, and had to go down to a VA hospital somewhere down south, I think Florida, for an operation. There were complications during the operation, and he ended up having to stay down in Florida for a couple of months to recover. He was an older veteran. He goes back up to his house in the Northeast, and his house is gone. They bulldozed it in his absence because of the International Property Maintenance Code. It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. So seriously, if you're a local community, I mean, they tried to do it in Jonesboro, and then they had a referendum and had it repealed because it was so bad and so overreaching and really an embarrassment. So anyway, we're going to reset here, take a break. We're going to finish out the day strong. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. Back in just a moment.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Welcome to the Arkansas Obamacare Hotline. We would be more than happy to help you enroll in Arkansas Obamacare today. We just need a little information about you. Let's get started. If you're disabled, pregnant, or looking for medical care for your child, the program is currently full, and there's no doctors to see you. Please hang up now. If you're an able-bodied adult, please press 1. If you're currently employed, we're sorry, but you most likely do not qualify for the program. Please quit your job and call back later. If you don't work and instead play video games all day with your cats in your grandmother's basement, please press 1. If you've never lived in Arkansas, press 1. If you currently live in another state, press 1. If you recently purchased a home in New Jersey for $750,000, please press 1. If your current identity has previously been used by another person, was created before your actual date of birth, or doesn't really exist, please press 1. Congratulations! It sounds like you're the perfect candidate to receive Arkansas Obamacare. Please stay on the line, and a hardworking DHS employee will be with you as soon as possible. While you're waiting, feel free to relax as your ambitions to gainful employment fade away. PHP Parody. The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
I haven't told you about my experience. I haven't told the audience about my experience when I went to vote last week. So last week I go to vote, and I am talking, trying to figure out, I'm standing in line, and there's a guy who comes up, and he was talking to one of the poll workers. And he comes up, and he says, you guys only gave me half a ballot. He's like, you guys only gave me half a ballot. Where's the rest? And he was filling out, I believe, a provisional ballot because I don't know if he had his ID or whatever. The voter ID was in place. I'm assuming that's because he had to put it in an envelope, and fill it out. Nobody else has to do that. He was having, but he was complaining. He was like, "Where's the rest of these people?" It was like, "Well, sir," they explained to this man, who was probably 45 years old. They explained to this man. They said, "Sir, you picked the Democrat. You picked the Democrat primary, and so." He was like, but the last time I voted, I got to vote for everybody. And I had my pick. And they're like, well, sir, you're thinking of the general election. And that's when anybody can vote on what that ballot, anybody can vote. It doesn't matter. But this is a primary. And so you have to pick either Democrat, nonpartisan, or Republican. You can't vote for Republicans if you have gotten or received a Democrat ballot. And this was extremely confusing for this man. And so I'm sitting here just patiently, watching this whole thing go down. And then he finally said, well, I want to vote for Asa Hutchinson. He was like, I came here to vote for Asa, this man said. And he was wearing he was a blue collar guy. He had a bit, I guess, a logo on his shirt from a business, and I kind of was like, I wonder if he was sent here. It's kind of what I was thinking. And so so basically what I know is, I think it's a safe speculation that when this man was asked Republican or Democrat, he said Democrat because that's probably what he tends to be, is a Democrat. But he showed up there specifically to vote for Asa and was upset that he wasn't able to vote for Asa. I thought that was interesting. I witnessed it firsthand. That's exactly what happened, but it got worse from there. So for those of you that don't know, who are listening to this program across the state, I live in Craighead County. That's where I live. It's where we broadcast this show from. It's where I've lived here my whole life. And so then this gentleman, and I don't know his name, and I wouldn't give it if I did. He was filling out. He put the ballot in the envelope, and then filled out his name on the envelope. And then it got to the point where he had to put what county he lives in, on his address. It said, county, whatever, And so it was Craighead, and he was like, how do you spell that? And the lady said, it went like this. C, and he wrote C, and then he looked up at her. And she said R, and he wrote down R, and he looked up at her. And yes, it went that way till the end of the word Craighead. And I just thought to myself, I had a lot of thoughts. What are your thoughts, I think that we have to be more engaged, I'll tell you that much. I mean, when you look at what the voter turnout was, and you combine the voter turnout with my experience, I just, we have, I was talking to somebody the other day that said the right to vote is way more dangerous for your fellow citizens than the right to carry a gun. Because who you vote for matters. Who you vote for depends on what kind of laws we all have to live under. And that's exactly right. I mean, you look at the registered voters, you have a total, you had 326,057, just over 10%, over 81%. Last Tuesday, over 81% of those registered to vote did not vote. Let me say that again. Over 81% of those registered to vote did not. Did not. And somehow, out of that, we have individuals that have difficulty spelling words, basic words, who did vote. So we have the government we deserve. There's no question. I mean, hey, look, this is the government that we have. This is the government, and if we're not going to get engaged, if we're not going to try to, if we don't recognize that liberty must be tended to, government must be tended to, then we're going to kind of continue down this path. Either people are comfortable and fine with the way things are, or either people just don't care and they don't think they can actually make a difference. I don't know which one it is. I tell you this much. The stakes are high. I mean, with Asa Hutchinson and Jan Morgan in that whole primary, you had $4 million versus $130,000. So, and which is why Asa, didn't want to debate her. So special interests certainly had their say. Special interests certainly spoke because, because of that whole money, advantage or disadvantage, depending on, where you're coming from. We certainly know that. But back in 2016 in the primary when Donald Trump won, the reason Trump won, not just the primary in Arkansas, but the reason he won nationally is because people knew what the messages were, and they knew what the other side said, and everybody knew what the choice was. And they knew that if Trump won, their lives would not be as bad as if Hillary won. People were convinced that Hillary Clinton and a win by Hillary Clinton would drastically make their lives miserable, would increase the amount of pain in their lives. That is what people who voted for Trump understood. That basic fact. And so that's why you had that's why you had the turnout that you had. Specifically in Arkansas when the primary was going on. Had some very engaged people. You know what's funny? The irony, I was reading one of the DNC emails the other day, and the DNC had basically the instructions to the press and how they didn't want CNN to give airtime to people like Scott Walker or Marco Rubio or Jeb Bush. They wanted people like Ted Cruz and Donald Trump to pull the other candidates further right. They wanted people like Donald Trump to force Jeb Bush to go further right, or to force Marco Rubio to go further right. And this was the strategy in the emails from the DNC. And so CNN, they do all these coverages, and reports of Trump at his massive rallies and everything else, and they thought they were laying a net, and yet they fell into their own net. They thought they were laying a net on the Russia investigation, and yet they keep falling into their own nets. Because now we've got serious questions about the FBI and the DOJ and spying on the Trump campaign. We'll see you tomorrow.
The news and talk of